The Himalayas don't need to prove anything to the world. Its peaks have become icons. Its records are already part of history. But there's another side of the Himalayas that you may have never truly seen. Here, deep valleys, vast glaciers, ancient monasteries, and remote villages exist side by side. Every journey through this landscape is an encounter with some of the most extreme natural conditions on Earth. A place where altitude, climate, and terrain constantly push the limits of human endurance. On this journey, we'll explore some of the least seen corners of the Himalayas. Places that make you wonder how people can survive in conditions this harsh. If there's one place in the Himalayas built to test the limits of human endurance, it's the Snowman Trek. This isn't a single mountain pass. It's a journey that lasts nearly a month across some of the most remote wilderness in Bhutan. The trek stretches for more than 340 kilometres. You cross a series of passes above 5,000 metres. You travel through valleys where roads are almost non-existent. The dropout rate is famously high. Many people say fewer people have completed the Snowman Trek than have stood on the summit of Mount Everest. For much of the route, you're moving at elevations where oxygen levels are only about half of what they are at sea level. Snowstorms can arrive even during trekking season. The weather can change completely within just a few hours. At the end of the day, you don't return to a hotel or even a village. Just a few orange tents standing in a landscape of grey rock. Snow-covered slopes surround you. Temperatures often fall below freezing. This isn't just a trekking route. It's one of the most remote corners of the Himalayas that very few people have ever reached. This is not where you would expect to find a monastery. Tiger's Nest clings to a sheer cliff high above the Paro Valley. White walls sit right at the edge of the drop. Behind them are rocky mountains. Below them is open space stretching hundreds of meters down. The monastery sits at an elevation of about 3,100 meters, nearly 900 meters above the valley floor below. To get here, you have to hike for hours along the steep mountain trails of the Pero Valley. Even when the monastery finally comes into view, the journey isn't over. You still have to keep climbing. The buildings are connected by stairways and narrow walkways that run along the mountainside. For centuries, monks have continued to live and practice on this mountainside, far from major cities, far from the main roads, an environment where simply reaching the site is already a challenge. In one of Bhutan's most rugged mountain regions, Tiger's Nest has remained here for generations, still standing on the mountainside, enduring the altitude, the weather, and the isolation of the Himalayas for hundreds of years. Trongsa Dzong almost blends into the mountainside behind it. Forested hills and deep valleys surround it in central Bhutan. The structure was built on a narrow strip of land halfway up the mountain, not on the highest peak, not at the bottom of the valley. That terrain forced the entire complex to stretch along the slope, instead of being built on a broad, level surface. The buildings do not sit on the same level. Some are higher, some are lower, connected by corridors, courtyards, and stone staircases. The daily rhythm of monastic life continues as it always has. A place where people have few options other than adapting to the landscape around them. The road keeps climbing through pine forest before finally bringing you to Dochula. The pass sits at an elevation of about 3,100 meters. Near the summit stand 108 chortens. They are arranged in several concentric circles. Surrounded by forested mountains and long chains of Himalayan peaks in the distance. On clear days, the mountains can appear in remarkable detail. But the weather here changes quickly. Clouds and fog frequently sweep across the pass, sometimes hiding the entire landscape within minutes. Dochula is one of the mountain passes that connects different parts of Bhutan. The terrain constantly separates valleys from one another. As a result, traveling between regions often means crossing high points like this. Cheri is tucked away among Bhutan's green hills. To reach it, you have to walk through steep forest trails. The path keeps climbing. After only a short distance, the settlements disappear from view. The monastery was built on a narrow piece of land in the middle of the hills. Forest on one side, steep slopes dropping into the valley on the other. Flat ground is almost non-existent across much of the surrounding landscape. Even finding enough space to build here was a challenge. This place reflects a familiar reality of the Himalayas. Travel is often determined more by terrain than by distance. Winter arrives early in the Zanskar Valley. Temperatures often fall below minus 20 degrees Celsius. Some nights drop close to minus 30 degrees Celsius. That's when part of the Zanskar River begins to freeze. The river that once separated the canyon walls becomes a road. Locals call this route the Chadar, meaning blanket. The name comes from the sheet of ice that covers the river during winter. On both sides rise steep rock walls of the Himalayas. Beneath your feet is ice that constantly changes with the temperature. Some sections are flat and easy to cross. Others develop cracks or thin ice, forcing you onto the rocky banks. Before modern roads arrived, this was one of the few ways to travel between Zanskar and the outside world during winter. Instead of finding a way over the mountains, people used the frozen river beneath them. Not many lakes in the world sit above 4,200 meters like Pangong Tso. Part of it lies in India. Most of it stretches into Tibet. Water fills the landscape in front of you, yet this is a saltwater lake. About 134 kilometers long, it is one of the largest lakes in the high Himalayas. In a landscape with almost no trees and very few settlements, the blue water stretches like a ribbon between the mountains. The air here is noticeably thinner than at sea level. Even simple activities can leave you tired more quickly than usual. Winter is even harsher. Temperatures can drop below minus 20 degrees Celsius. The lake gradually freezes over. Even so, life continues on this plateau. During summer, Changpa herders bring their yaks and goats to the grasslands around the lake. At this altitude, they have adapted to one of the harshest environments in the Himalayas. At an elevation of nearly 3,850 metres in the Zanskar Valley, Phugtal was built directly in front of the entrance to a large natural cave. The entire monastery looks more like part of the mountain than a separate structure. The buildings follow the shape of the cave and the cliff face. Different sections sit at different elevations. All of them are stacked onto a near vertical rock wall. Stairways and narrow passageways connect the different parts of the monastery. You can't reach this place by driving all the way there. The final stretch still has to be done on foot. Some sections follow the mountainside. Others cross suspension bridges hanging above the river. Phugtal remains an active monastery. Monks continue to study and practice here to this day. Hunder sits in Ladakh's Nubra Valley. The area rises more than 3,000 meters above sea level. A place where sand dunes appear at the foot of the Himalayas. Nubra receives very little rainfall throughout the year. Most moisture is blocked by the surrounding mountain ranges before it can reach the valley. As a result, meltwater from glaciers becomes a vital source of life for the entire region. Herds of double-humped Bactrian camels still move across the sands of Hunder. Today, many visitors come here to ride camels among the dunes of the Nubra Valley, a place where desert and high mountains exist in the same landscape. Beyond every bend is another stretch of road climbing through the rocky mountains of Ladakh. That road leads to Khardung La. The pass rises to more than 5,300 meters above sea level. The air here is far thinner than in the lowlands. Oxygen levels are only about 50% of what they are at sea level. Even breathing takes effort. A short walk can leave many people stopping to catch their breath. Winter is even harsher. Temperatures can drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius. At times they come close to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Snow and ice often cover the road. Cold winds constantly sweep across the exposed mountain slopes. To reach the remote valleys north of Ladakh, you first have to get through this place. Bare mountain slopes surround Spiti. Dust covers much of the landscape. Along many roads, it is difficult to find enough greenery to break up the grey-brown colours of the valley. Rainfall here is extremely limited. Water has always been a valuable resource in Spiti. Winter is when conditions become most severe. Temperatures regularly fall below minus 20 degrees Celsius. Snow blankets the mountain roads. Many routes leading into the valley remain closed for months. Travel between settlements becomes far more difficult. Some communities are almost completely cut off until warmer weather returns. That is why many villages in the valley prepare food supplies and fuel long before winter arrives. Amid the dry mountains of the Annapurna region, Tilicho appears in the middle of a vast rocky basin. The lake sits at nearly 5,000 meters above sea level, one of the highest lakes in the Himalayas. Getting here is not easy. The trail follows steep mountainsides and long stretches of loose rock. Some sections are only wide enough for a few hikers. In some places, a vertical cliff rises on one side, while a deep valley drops away on the other. During the warmer months, the lake appears as a deep blue patch surrounded by the dry landscape of the high Himalayas. But when winter comes, temperatures drop well below 0 degrees Celsius. The surface gradually freezes over. Snow covers the slopes and much of the terrain around the lake. The altitude, snow, and rugged terrain have never made Tilicho an easy destination to reach. Namche Bazaar was built on a steep mountainside in the Khumbu region. The buildings spread across the slope in a semicircle. The entire town follows the terrain instead of spreading across flat ground like many other settlements. Trails connect Namche to the surrounding valleys and villages. The journey often crosses suspension bridges. Long climbs, steep mountainsides, even travel between communities depends on routes like these. Namche is one of the most important settlements on the route to Everest, but life here is still shaped by the limits of the landscape. Goods are still transported by yak. Food, fuel, and even construction materials staying connected to the outside world has never been simple. During winter, snow can blanket the rooftops and mountainsides around Namche. Visibility drops during prolonged snowfall. Travel and transportation throughout the region become more difficult. Many people begin the climb to Thorong La while it is still dark, not to watch the sunrise, but because conditions on the pass often change quickly once the day begins. The wind grows stronger, more clouds move in, and reaching the highest point becomes harder. The highest point on the route stands above 5,400 meters, one of the greatest elevations that hikers regularly reach in the Himalayas. The air is noticeably thinner here. Every step feels slower than usual. There is almost nowhere to escape the wind near the pass, only rock, snow, and open space between the mountains. When the weather turns, temperatures can drop rapidly even in the middle of the day. That is why Thorong La is widely considered one of the toughest sections of the entire Annapurna circuit. Along a stone wall within the grounds of Muktinath are 108 water spouts lined up in a row. Water flows continuously from glacial sources high in the mountains. The air at nearly 3,800 meters is already cold. The water is even colder. Many pilgrims still walk beneath each spout one by one. Stream after stream pours down from above. One spout after another. Many shiver from the cold. But they keep going until the ritual is complete. The scene takes place almost every day, amid the dry mountains of Mustang, amid the cold winds of the Himalayas. For pilgrims, this ritual is considered a form of purification before prayer. They believe the water from the high mountains can wash away misfortune and bring a sense of inner peace. That is why the cold has never been a reason to stop. Some travel hundreds of kilometers to get here and then willingly step beneath icy water in the high mountains of the Himalayas. Khumbu is where the highest mountains on Earth become part of the everyday landscape. Everest, Lhotse, and many other peaks surround this valley. They don't sit far off on the horizon. They rise directly above the villages and the roads that connect them. Many communities here are located above 3,000 meters. Life unfolds beneath mountainsides that tower thousands of meters overhead. Few places on Earth have such a dramatic difference in elevation between where people live and the highest peaks surrounding them. Winter brings snow and long stretches of cold weather. The slopes turn white. Many routes through the valley become harder to travel. Yet life continues beneath the shadow of Everest and the massive mountains that surround Khumbu. When people think of the Himalayas, they often picture green mountain forests and snow-covered peaks, but Upper Mustang looks completely different. Red-brown cliffs stretch all the way to the horizon. Dry canyons cut across this vast landscape. Wind moves through these valleys on a regular basis. Thousands of years of weathering have carved deep into the rock and earth. Leaving behind sheer cliffs, tall rock spires, and canyons with strikingly unusual shapes. Many of the cliffs contain caves carved deep into the rock. Some sit so high above the ground that even today it is difficult to imagine how they were once used. Settlements are scattered sparsely across this immense landscape. There are long stretches where all you see is rock, dust, and mountains. At times, the scenery makes this place feel more like a high-altitude desert than part of Nepal. Drier, more isolated, and harsh in a way that is very different from the rest of the Himalayas. At Namtso, the wind never really seems to stop. It sweeps across the lake, across the grasslands, then continues across the vast Tibetan plateau. The lake sits at nearly 4,700 meters above sea level. Its waters stretch between snow-covered mountains and open land extending in every direction. The lake is so large that in many places you can't even see the opposite shore. The natural conditions here are far from easy. Thin air, low temperatures, long winters with snow and ice covering much of the landscape around the lake. The cold winds make the environment even harsher. But for many Tibetans, Namtso is more than just a lake on the plateau. It is a sacred place, a place where nature and faith are almost inseparable. Namcha Barwa stands beside one of the deepest canyons on Earth. Below flows the Yarlung Tsangpo River. Above rise massive cliffs and mountain slopes hidden in clouds and snow. High mountains, dense forests, deep canyons, all packed into a relatively small area. Many parts of this region remain difficult to reach even today. Clouds regularly sweep across the mountainsides. The weather shifts constantly between different elevations. On some days, the entire mountain nearly disappears behind a thick blanket of cloud. This is one of the wildest corners of the entire Himalayas. Rongbuk sits in the wide open landscape north of Everest. The road leading here crosses the cold high plains of Tibet. The closer you get to the monastery, the more barren the surroundings become. Rock and earth stretch out in every direction. Very little is large enough to provide shelter from the winds of the plateau. Everest rises directly in front of Rongbuk, not far away on the horizon, but standing like a massive wall at the end of the valley. From many spots around the monastery, the mountain nearly fills the entire view. Wind regularly sweeps across this land. Winters are long, with temperatures dropping to extreme lows. The natural conditions here are far harsher than those found in most permanent settlements. Even so, Rongbuk remains an active monastery. Monks continue to live and practice in the high mountains of Tibet. Right beneath the highest mountain on Earth, it is also one of the closest inhabited places to Everest anywhere in the Himalayas. The deep blue waters wind through the Tibetan plateau like a network of giant rivers. This is Yamdrok, one of the most famous lakes in the region. The lake does not form a simple shape. Its shoreline constantly twists between hills and valleys. Long arms of water extend far inland. As a result, the lake can look completely different depending on where you see it from. Settlements are scattered along the shoreline. Between them lie vast stretches of open land extending for many kilometres. The horizon often feels far away in the distance. Many roads across Tibet pass through this area. From higher points along the mountainsides, Yamdrok appears like a massive blue ribbon across the landscape. But as you continue moving, its shape changes again. Hills and valleys gradually hide different sections of the lake from view. Hard to believe that thousands of people once lived here. Earthen walls cling to the hillsides. Structures climb higher and higher up the slopes. All of it stands in the arid landscape of western Tibet. Guge was not built on a plain, nor was it located in a broad valley. The entire city developed across hills and earthen cliffs. Even today, moving through the ruins means constantly climbing up and down with the terrain. Rock and barren ground stretch out in every direction. Canyons carved by time cut across the landscape. For many kilometers, there is almost no sign of large settlements, yet an entire city once existed here. For centuries, Guge was the center of a kingdom on the Tibetan plateau. Its people built palaces, temples, and residential areas on terrain that was already difficult to reach. Today, little remains beyond earthen walls and scattered ruins. But the scale of Guge is still unmistakable. Standing in the isolated lands of western Tibet, people still work here every day. Customs officers, border guards, the people who maintain a human presence at Khunjerab amid the mountains of the Himalayas. Khunjerab sits at nearly 4,700 metres above sea level, one of the highest international border crossings in the world. The air here is much thinner than in the lowlands. The landscape looks quite different from many other parts of the Himalayas. Narrow valleys and sheer cliffs gradually disappear. In their place is a vast open expanse stretching between mountain ranges. The horizon extends in multiple directions. Winter often lasts for months. Snow covers most of the area. Temperatures can drop to around -25 degrees Celsius. Cold winds sweep across the plateau with almost nothing to block them. Even so, operations at the border crossing continue. A place where the cold, the altitude, and the distance are simply part of. In many places, the highest mountains are located far from towns and villages. Rakaposhi is different. From the Hunza Valley, the mountain seems to rise almost straight into the sky. Its base lies not far from roads and settlements, while the summit towers thousands of meters higher above. The elevation difference between the valley floor and the peak is among the greatest in the world. That scale is visible across the entire mountainside. Walls of rock and ice climb upward almost without interruption. The distances are difficult to judge with the naked eye. Rakaposhi makes everything below it seem much smaller than it really is. This is also a harsh environment. Snow and ice cover much of the mountain at higher elevations. Avalanches and rockfalls are a familiar part of life on these slopes. Rakaposhi is not the highest mountain in the Himalayas, but few places convey such a powerful sense of scale. All you have to do is stand in the valley and look up, and it becomes clear why it is considered one of Pakistan's most impressive mountains. Wooden planks hang suspended above the river. Gaps between many of the boards are wide enough to see the water below. That image has been associated with the Hussaini Suspension Bridge for years. The bridge stretches for about 200 metres. Steel cables on either side are the only handholds. Wind frequently moves through the Hunza Valley. The bridge sways slightly with every step. Below flows the Hunza River. Water from mountain glaciers continuously feeds it. The river rushes through a valley shaped by rugged terrain. Getting from one bank to the other has never been simple. Hussaini was not built to test the courage of visitors. For many years, local people have used this bridge as part of their daily lives, a way to cross the river in a mountain region where the landscape itself creates barriers between. Reaching K2 base camp requires days of hiking. There is no road leading here. The journey ends deep within the mountains of the Karakoram. The base camp sits among massive rocks, ice fields, and glaciers. Settlements are far behind you. The familiar signs of everyday life gradually disappear along the way. K2 rises at the end of the valley. Broad Peak and a series of other giant mountains stand nearby. Many exceed 7,000 meters in height. They are concentrated within a relatively small area at a density rarely seen anywhere else on Earth. At night, temperatures often drop sharply even during climbing season. The weather can change completely within a matter of hours. Cold winds from the glaciers constantly move through the valley. K2 Base Camp reveals the isolation of the Karakoram better than almost anywhere else. A place where simply getting there is already a major challenge. Baltoro does not look like the image of a glacier that many people imagine. Its surface is covered with rubble, rock, and debris from the surrounding mountainsides. In many places, it is difficult to tell that beneath that layer of stone lies a massive body of ice slowly moving through the Yehuau, the valley. The glacier stretches for dozens of kilometres through the heart of the Karakoram. On both sides stand towering mountain walls. Some of the highest peaks on Earth rise within this region. K2, Broad Peak, Gasherbrum 1, Gasherbrum 2. Everything about Baltoro feels immense. Massive boulders are scattered across the glacier's surface. The river of ice continues through the valley before disappearing among distant mountain ranges. Peaks thousands of meters high rise from both sides of the valley. During the day, melting ice forms streams of cold water flowing across the glacier. At night, temperatures drop sharply again. The glacier is not completely still. It continues to move, little by little, through the mountains of the Looking up from the Phugtal Valley, the mountain almost fills the entire sky. Not because Nanga Parbat is the highest peak in the Himalayas, but because the mountain rises almost continuously from the valley floor. This is the Phugtal Face, one of the highest mountain faces in the world. From the base to the summit, there is about 4,600 metres of vertical relief. A massive wall of rock, ice and snow stretching high above. The steep slopes create an extremely harsh environment. Snow accumulates at higher elevations. Ice and rock are constantly exposed to the forces of weather. Avalanches and rockfalls are not uncommon on this mountainside. The scale of the Phugtal Face is difficult to grasp through photographs alone. Cliffs, ice-covered slopes and mountain gullies spread across an enormous area. Even climbing teams appear tiny when seen on the face. Standing beneath the Phugtal Face, you are not just looking at a mountain, you are looking at one of the largest mountain walls on Earth. Himalayas are often defined by records. The highest mountains, the highest roads, the most remote places. But in the end, what stays with you is probably not just the altitude or the harsh conditions. It's the fact that people continue to live here, in places where nature has always been the one setting the rules. Of all the places featured today, which one impressed you the most? And if you had the chance, which one would you want to explore for yourself? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed journeys like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to join us on the adventures ahead.